Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Transformational Astrology. I'm Henry Seltzer, and we want to talk about this full moon. It's a rather strong full moon that's coming up on Monday on May 12th. And let's take a look right away at the chart. So here we have, as you know, the natural houses, starting with Aries. Taurus is the second house, and this is a version of whole sign houses. We're not going to be too concerned where the actual ascendant is on the West Coast, although if we were just broadcasting to the West Coast, we might do that. Instead, we're going to leave that out. This is the actual midheaven of the chart at 2 degrees of Aries. And the ascendant of the chart on the West Coast is 19 degrees of Cancer. So if we just look at this in terms of where they are in the zodiac, looking at Aries identified with the first house and Taurus, second house, and so on, we can see that there's a lot of activity here in Aries. And in fact, we're even including Saturn in that, 2858, almost 29, about a degree away from the Aries cusp. And, you know, we have a chance in the TimePassages software to declare it either way, just to make that clear. So if you go to Settings, or Preferences in this case, depending on the operating system level, and you go to Display Options, you can see how the house margin setting can be up to 3 degrees or even 5 degrees. They sometimes call it the 5-degree rule. And we have chosen to apply it to whole sign houses. If we didn't apply it to whole sign houses, it would come out back here at the end of Pisces. But we do want to apply it, I think. And so that's the choice that I've made to be able to just indicate, you know, if this was a normal ascendant, we definitely want to say that Saturn was part of it. And that's what we're doing here by adding it to the 1 degree position, very close, 2 degrees away from Neptune right now. So that's very interesting. So in this full moon chart, the sun is still in Taurus, getting close to the position of Uranus, not as close as it's been in recent lunations, full moon lunations, and opposite the moon at 22 degrees of Scorpio. And one of the things we can say about this is because the sun at 22 and Uranus at 26, the midpoint is actually somewhere in 24 degrees of Taurus. And what do we have? But we have Jupiter as well at 2347. We have also the position of Chiron at 24 degrees of Aries. So these are all connected with each other. Sextile between Jupiter and Chiron, you see, is very much coming out right now because of Jupiter getting that far into Gemini. And we also have this 24-degree position of the midpoint of Sun and Uranus. So what we might say is there's some brilliant ideas floating around Uranus with Jupiter. They are very much affecting us in terms of this full moon, which is the culmination of the Taurus lunation cycle that started when the sun was about 15 degrees earlier, you see, at 7 degrees of Taurus. And we're involving Chiron, and Chiron is the wounded healer, so there may be some consciousness around the wounded healer, around where we have inner wounding left over from childhood. Things that we couldn't handle at the time as children. Instead, we walled them away. The tendency at that early age is not to go there. We don't want to think about those painful things, those shameful things. But now, in our adulthood or our burgeoning adulthood, we have come to the point of realizing that they are important to us, and this may be a particularly strong time on Monday, you see, with this full moon right in the morning hours on the West Coast. We may very well find that we are dwelling in our mind. If you start thinking about inner wounding at this time, there may be a healing potential for that. Eris is right nearby. Eris is a feminine warrior in support of soul intention, goes to great depth within the psyche. So this may be a time when your inner wounding can speak to you and perhaps be a positive factor in your next stage of your personal evolution, discovering where you've been hung up, perhaps held back from being your most authentic self, because, you know, inner wounds tend to jump up at you and just when you least expect it, kind of throw a monkey wrench. And so what the recommendation is to just start paying attention to those events and just be aware when that comes up. It may very well signal a time for you to look into what the earliest event was. When can you first remember these feelings? When can you associate it with something that maybe was a traumatic event in the past? Maybe you've forgotten about it mostly, but can you just be kind to yourself in this hurt place within you? Can you reach down with a loving hand from your higher self, from your more spiritually developed self, and say it's okay, and say, I can be there, I can be there the way nobody was there, maybe when this happened. So, like I say, the recipe is not to make violent changes or feel bad about the situation or feel in despair, but rather to take a positive attitude and just to notice. You might be denying yourself to do something, and you might recognize that only it comes from maybe feelings of lack of self-worth or whatever. And so as you notice these things, and as you decide not to shy away from it, but to just calmly dwell within it, to look into that a little bit more, to go with inquiry, go with meditation, go with journaling, to try to figure this out a little bit more, but just notice. You don't have to make changes. All you have to do is notice. When it comes to greater consciousness, that's an important part of the whole battle. And speaking of consciousness, what do we have also in this full moon? But we have Mercury at 3 degrees of Taurus, exactly square to Pluto at 3 degrees and a little bit more minute. Oh, it's to the minute practically. 3 degrees Taurus, 46, versus Pluto at 3 degrees Aquarius, 48. So such a close, strong connection, even though not supported so much by the other factors in this chart. Although, it is, of course, true that Neptune is sextile, and Neptune is reinforced with a close presence also of Saturn. So we do have a bit of a concentration on the transformational effects of Pluto and Aquarius, wherever that might land in your chart as well. And we have, this square. We have actually it's a T-square with including Mercury with this Scorpio 145 position of Haumea. And Haumea with Pluto, I've been able to identify, is really trying to apply the feelings of inner moral compass, how you would feel about the right way to do something might be to treat people well, have equality, treat people the way you would like to be treated. That's a kind of a natural law in a way, and it comes with Haumea. And telling the truth, that's very important. Well, that's Haumea, but Haumea with Pluto may be also about discovering where that has not always been the case, where the truth versus the lies about a situation. It could be on a public level in the collective, or it could be in your own personal case. The truth coming out, and of course we welcome that. We want truth. We want the true story, and we want to treat it with kindness and not condemnation when we can discover where it hasn't been exactly the way it should have been. Those kind of things can be coming up, including the inner wounding, including the Scorpio presence of the moon as well, which takes us to depth, does it not? And this is in the 8th house of the natural chart. So these things may be part of what we're encountering here as we deal with this full moon, which is the culmination of the first couple of weeks that we have of this Taurus lunation cycle, which was triggered actually at the time of the new moon by, again, the T-square between here in Taurus and also, at that time also Mars. So in the new moon that we're still in that cycle, Mars was opposite Pluto. So we do have a possibility of anger emerging. We do have a possibility of kind of seeing our way through to the moral core of the matter and what we really feel is the right way, and acknowledging where in the past there's been deception or even outright lying, maybe on the part of somebody else, that we are coming to terms with, and we may have to make adjustments. So it's a time of culmination of the impulse from the new moon and making adjustments as necessary to continue with our own personal evolution as we're reaching for the light, greater consciousness, greater understanding of who we are and how we can be our most authentic self. And particularly with Eris, how can we find what that might be in terms of what we have deep inside, our real, true life purpose, sense of life purpose, the important things that are really vital to where we're heading, in our real soul intention. So I call Eris a feminine warrior in support of soul intention, and so it does go to depth, and it's very important actually, the placement in your own chart and by transit. So it's really good to be looking into that. Now, one more thing that's very interesting now is this Saturn-Neptune, which is not quite complete, but it will be in the same degree pretty soon. In fact, by the new moon, which is the 26th of May, coming right up in a couple of weeks, we will have Saturn in Aries, very close therefore to Neptune. Gets within 1/4 of a degree by July. And as we see it coming very close right here, we do have the new pontificate that has been selected, and he seems to be somebody that takes things like, we say, the natural law of kindness, and he has also represented that a human is a human, no matter what citizen they are, or if they're a refugee from oppression in their own home country. People don't go on that road willingly, it's usually because they're forced to. So, treating immigrants with kindness is part of that, and part of what the Pope seems to be about, which is very interesting, as this Neptune conjunction in Aries, which it makes an aspect to this 1 degree mark of Scorpio, where we see Haumea. And there's a bit of an activist agenda coming up too, which is represented more by this, the Maki-Maki, which is another one of these new KBO planets, also connects to nature, but it connects to nature in a way that involves activism. So what you will see is people starting to, not just be in their understanding of natural law and our connection to nature, which is so important, but it's starting to do some kind of activity or activism that might make a change to things, taking that into their own hands, either social activism, it could be, or evolutionary, not evolutionary, but ecology, for the environmental activism. And it is opposite to Venus in this configuration. So the opposition of the sun and moon is also shared one sign over by the opposition between Maki-Maki at 10 degrees of Aries and Venus at 8 degrees of, 8 degrees of Aries is Venus, and 10 degrees of Libra is Maki-Maki opposite, which there could be more activism. We've been seeing some of that. We've been seeing protest crowds. We've been seeing hands-off demonstrations. And then, again, very interesting to see this coming alignment, getting closer and closer, and of course even at the end of 2024, it was coming on, and seeing the new Pope, which, after all, Saturn represents authority and society, and the Neptune represents the spiritual component. The age of Pisces, which is now kind of winding up, which was the Christian era. So, seeing a new spiritual authority come into existence, just as this conjunction is forming, is very interesting in terms of astrology reflecting the events of the world as they're taking place. So this is all very important. It gives clues. Jupiter is activated by the 22 degree position of the sun and moon in Taurus and Scorpio. So we do have a little bit of a sense of optimism coming from somewhere, and a little bit of the sense of how can we heal the wounds that in either our individual selves or in the collective itself. How can we try to apply something to that creates greater consciousness, and we can understand a little bit better how things can get thrown off by misplaced sense of tribalism or rejection of others, something like that comes from inner wounding. So it's a very important timing. This is a very vital time in the United States for insisting that things like due process be honored. It's part of our democratic law abiding. It's part of the rule of law. So anyway, I'll leave you with that idea, and we'll wind up, transition back here. So I hope that was helpful. And once again, it's so important to recognize that the universe really does have our back. It seems sometimes a stretch to say that, but it really is almost always the case that they say it's an ill wind that blows no good, that there is within all of the storm and drang that we have and the economic situation that we may be questioning, there is a seed of, maybe shaking things up might be helpful in some ways, and we can start to reevaluate and regroup and see how we can make things better in this country and in the rest of the world. As the new Pope said in his very beginning speech to the square in Rome, peace, he said. So let's hope for that. Take care. See you soon.